Hi, this is Robert from Part Fusion Electronics. I'm continuing on the refinement of my giant LED. So here I have my 3D printed LED. And what I've done is I've coated it with the XTC. I've put 4 layers of the XTC. The first layer was almost clear. I added a little bit of black coloring, but it was basically translucent, so it had no real effect. And I sanded that back down to about P220 grit. Then I added another layer. This time I used a black kind of polyester pigment, so it's much more opaque. And then I sanded that back again to 220. And then I put 2 layers of this white. It's XTC mixed with the white pigment, and it's a bit uneven. So I'm gonna go through now and I'm gonna sand that back. So this is the kind of sequence I'm gonna go through. So I'm gonna sand it back to 220, and then I can go all the way up to 2500. And if I still have these low spots, I'll probably, like this one here, you can see there's a little low spot there. What I'll probably end up doing is mixing up a very small amount of the XTC and filling in those little spots that are gone, and curing that again, and then trying to get it absolutely smooth with no little divots in it, and then go through 220, 400, 800. That's basically what I had done here. So this has just been smoothed out with just a rough metalwork file. And then this was all these sequences up to P250. But if you look, I don't think these are going to appear. There is actually still visible scratches. Just kind of here. And then the last step I did with that was to use this glass polishing compound. When I was at Maker Central a few weeks ago, I also picked up some of these kind of micro mesh pads. And I also picked up some of this polishing paper. I also made up a new version of my 3D printed curved sanding block that fits nice and comfortably on the sides. So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to kind of spend the next number of hours, maybe day or so, going through sanding all this up, maybe, as I said, filling in some of the little pot marks, and then sanding all the way up, hopefully to a nice shiny surface, something like this, but without all of the visible scratch marks. So it's now the next morning, and I spent about 2 hours sanding this down with 220 grit sandpaper, and I kind of made a mistake in that I should have just done maybe about 15 minutes of sanding and then filled in any of the low spots. So you can kind of see here where it catches the light, just there, this spot here, and there's a few other very low spots. So they're all the way around. On the surface here, there's actually a particular line there that's noticeable. And then all in here is too low. I need to build out the edges here. So I said I should have sanded it down for about 15 minutes and then gone in and reapplied another layer of resin. And so that's what I'm going to have to do now. I'm going to apply another layer of resin, probably 2, build out these thin spots and these edges. You can see here where it actually kind of started to break down through into the plastic, or the PLA plastic. Fill in all these kind of shiny spots and low spots, and then do another layer, which is a thin coating across the whole surface. And what I'll do is I'm going to do this in a slightly different color, a grey. I don't think I mentioned it yesterday, but I did the original layer in black, and then I did this layer in white. So if I cut through too deeply, I would see, and I could hold back, so you can kind of see there where it's not as white as a previous version. I'll put up a video showing that. Anyway, so I've still got many hours ahead of me. So it's now 2 days later, and I finally got to the point where I can move on to the next step. So what I've done is I've sanded this whole surface down, or I filled multiple layers of resin. I used a masking tape technique to kind of get these edges much more filled, and much more pronounced and less rounded. I'll put up a photo of that. And I've put on, I lost track of how many layers I ended up having to put back. So it's now fully sanded and smooth to 220 grit. One issue I had is that I kind of sanded down a little bit too much. You can kind of see it just here around the edges. Now I'm going to use 400 grit sandpaper to take out any of the 220 grit sanding marks, and then I'll do the same with 800 and then all the way up to 2500, and then I'll go on to using papers and the kind of cutting compound to get a shiny surface, shiny smooth surface. So that's what I'm going to do now. So after about 4 hours of sanding from 400 up to 2500 grit sandpaper, and then I used the 3, 2 and a 1 micron wet and dry polishing pad and some glass polishing compound. This is the result. It's a nice reflective shine. So the underlying print was PLA, many layers of the XTC, and then a lot of elbow grease. So this was perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. So I'll do some follow-up videos using this master to make a mold with silicone. Then my ideas for making the legs and the internal circuitry, and how I'm going to cast those. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.